meet them every week. Somebody will grab my hand and talk about a mental health problem or talk about addiction. We just learned just yesterday that Prince died of an overdose, of a drug that he was taking to ease his pain. We've got to really face up to this and help people. I also want to do everything I can to make sure that within the first 100 days of my presidency, if I'm so fortunate as to be sworn in next January, that we will get to work on comprehensive immigration reform. Now, this is one of the big differences in this campaign. I have a difference with Senator Sanders. You know, back in 2007, we had a great chance to pass comprehensive immigration reform. President Bush said he would sign it. The House said they would act on it. It was up to the Senate. I was in the Senate, and I voted for the bill that Ted Kennedy put together. I was proud to do it. Senator Sanders voted against it 6 times. And so many people say that was our last best chance. Well, come next January, we are going to put forward comprehensive immigration reform. And we're going to work hard to get it accomplished. Contrast that with Donald Trump, who started his campaign insulting immigrants, has continued his campaign insulting immigrants, has gone so far as to insult and attack a distinguished federal judge, a man who was appointed on his merits, a man born in Indiana, which last time I checked was part of America, to 2 Mexican parents, who is presiding now, the judge is, over a lawsuit pointing out how fraudulent Trump University is, how it has been a con game that has benefited Donald Trump, but hurt so many people, including those who couldn't afford it, who were urged to max out their credit cards, spend down their retirement accounts so that they could go to this Trump U. And that does sound appropriate, doesn't it? I'm going to have to use that more often. Because if he gets anywhere near the White House, you know what he's going to do? He's going to Trump you. So anyway, the judge is doing his job. That's what he got appointed to do. And Donald Trump wants to change the subject like he does all the time. So instead of facing up to the facts that are coming out, the New York Attorney General said, hey, it's a fraud from start to finish, this whole effort. He wants to change the subject, and he's attacking a distinguished jurist in order to try to get people to ignore the facts about how he hurt other people. You know, he is in it for himself in every way. And that is yet another reason why we can't let him near the White House. And so his idea about immigration is to create what he's calling a deportation force. Now, you've seen old movies where people go marching in, where you've got police forces and military forces and paramilitary forces. Some of you came from countries where that happened, where they knock down doors and they go in and they pull people out. That is what Donald Trump is proposing happen in our country. That is so un-American, so dangerous. So whether we're talking about foreign policy and national security, So, anyway, if you talk about national security and foreign policy, he's disqualified, I think. You know, look, I have said I've known a lot of presidents. I've been very fortunate. I was appointed by President Carter to a position on something called the Legal Services Corporation. I knew President Reagan because my husband was a governor, and we would go to the White House and go to events where I got to meet President Reagan. I knew President George H.W. Bush, and he was always willing to talk about issues and ask what was on your mind. He might not agree with you, but he was always willing to have that conversation. And, of course, I had a front row seat to my husband's 8 years, which worked out pretty well for our country, I think. And even though I disagreed with a lot of what President George W. Bush stood for, after 9/11, I was a senator from New York. He was absolutely committed to helping us rebuild New York, and he never wavered, and I will never forget that. So I have seen presidents up close, and I had the great privilege of working as Secretary of State for President Obama in his first term. And I think you can go back into our history and think about the qualities, the temperament, the ideas that we expect from our presidents. President Lincoln said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Donald Trump seems to think divisiveness is what we need in America, when I believe that is absolutely wrong. So I've had this privilege of seeing presidents, of knowing how hard this job is, whether I agreed with the decisions they made or not. And that's why I feel so strongly that we must stand up against this divisive, dangerous, hateful rhetoric coming from Donald Trump. I can't do that, though, without your help. I have laid out plans. You know, some people make fun of me. They say, "Oh, there she goes. More plans." I mean, look, I know it's not the most exciting thing, right? To tell you how I want to do infrastructure jobs and advanced manufacturing and more money into research and fight climate change with clean, renewable energy jobs. I know that. I understand it, but here's what I believe. I believe an election should actually be about issues, and that I should tell you what I want to do. Donald Trump's telling you he wants to have a deportation force. I'm telling you I want comprehensive immigration reform. Donald Trump is telling you he wants to give huge tax breaks to the billionaires. I'm telling you I want to tax billionaires and millionaires. Donald Trump is telling you he wants to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I'm telling you I want to improve it. Donald Trump is telling you that he wants to make women's right to choose a criminal offense. I want to protect it. Donald Trump is telling you he wants to defund Planned Parenthood. I want to protect it from those kinds of partisan attacks. Donald Trump seems to be going along with the Republican philosophy of trying to undercut marriage equality. I want to defend it. And I want to work to end discrimination against the LGBT community. I want to defend voters' rights, and I want Supreme Court justices to be appointed who will reverse Citizens United. I want to protect the right to organize and bargain collectively, which has been hard fought for, and the American labor movement helped to create the American middle class. Donald Trump actually tries to prevent that in his private business and would as president. I want to take on the gun lobby and try to get common sense gun safety reforms. And we're going to do that together, because 33,000 people a year are dying from guns. No more school shootings, no more shootings in our neighborhoods, no more shootings in our workplace. Now, look, we can't expect to stop all of them, but we know we can stop some and save lives if we close the gun show loophole, if we close the online loophole, if we close what's called the Charleston loophole, if we reverse this terrible law that gave gun makers and sellers liability protection from their own actions. And, you know, this is why it's important for California. Why was that law ever presented to the Congress? Because the gun lobby saw states like California passing laws to hold gun manufacturers and sellers accountable. If you sell a military-style weapon and you advertise it to young people and something happens, maybe you should be held accountable for not advertising the way that it would have been more likely to be used safely. Maybe if you don't care who you're selling guns and ammunition to online, somebody like the shooter in Aurora, Colorado, who went into the movie theater after buying his ammunition online would be stopped because he had serious mental illness. You can go down the list. The young man in Connecticut who went into that elementary school and killed all those little first graders, he was seriously disturbed. And yet, he had a whole arsenal. And the young man in South Carolina who went to buy a gun, and under the law as it is now, at the end of 3 days, you get to buy it whether the background check is done or not. So he went back at the end of 3 days. He got that gun. Within 24 hours, they found out he had a felony record. He shouldn't have been sold the gun. He took that gun, he went to the church in Charleston, and he murdered 9 people who were worshiping there. So we think about how we can save lives. That's my goal. This has absolutely nothing to do with taking away the rights of responsible gun owners. We can do this consistent with the Second Amendment. Bernie Sanders voted against the Brady Bill 5 times, voted to give liability protection to gun makers and sellers. He and I really disagree about this. And as your president, I will work with the vast majority of Americans, more than 90%, and in fact, about 75% of gun owners who believe we can make these changes consistent with the Constitution. And that's what we should try to do. So there is a lot at stake in this election for us here at home and around the world. I want to produce positive results for Americans. I want to protect our country and lead the world with steadiness and strength and smarts, and I want to unify our country. We are better when we are working together. We are not all going to agree with each other. That doesn't happen in America. We know that. We have a lot of reason to disagree. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't listen to each other, show respect for one another, work with each other to try to see how much common ground we can find. I will go anywhere, meet with anyone, anytime to find common ground. I did it as First Lady, as Senator, as Secretary of State. And I will do that as your president, 24/7. That will be my mission, to bring our country together, to solve our problems together, and especially to send an absolutely clear message to our children and our young people that America's best years are ahead of us. I am confident. I am optimistic. I am not one of these people running for president who spends all of his time downgrading America. I believe we have problems. What country doesn't? But we already are great. And if we work together, we can be even greater, in my opinion. So please help me. Now, how many of you still have your ballots sitting on the kitchen counter? Please go home today and mail them in, right? Talk to your friends, your relatives, your family, everybody. Tell them to mail those ballots back in. And if you don't remember or you don't have a ballot, then please show up and vote on June 7th. And there's still time to be part of our campaign. Go to HillaryClinton.com/CA for California to see how you can help turn out the vote. Because I want to finish really strong in California. And if all things are expected to occur, as I hope they will, by Tuesday, I will have captured the Democratic nomination for president. And then I will need you to work with me to win in November, and then to work with me to make our country all that we know it can be. That is my mission. Let's go out and make the future that our children and our grandchildren deserve.